Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good morning and welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. My name is Alan Diehl. I currently serve on the Interreligious Council of Linn County and also am the Vice President of the Humanists of Linn County. On this morning's show, we'll be discussing the subject, the compatibility of economic progress and environmental protection. So often we hear that economic progress and environmental protection are mutually exclusive and that they fundamentally oppose one another. So today we're going to challenge that idea. And here to talk to us about this morning, I have two guests. And I'd like for you to just take just a minute or so to talk a little bit about what you do and why this particular subject is important to you.
Alan, thanks for having us this morning. I'm Joe Horaney. I'm the Communications Director for the Cedar Rapids Linn County Solid Waste Agency. For the agency, I do outreach, our marketing and advertising efforts. I also visit with every city council in Linn County, Iowa about the agency, our services and programs. And I'm also the agency's environmental management representative for our environmental management system.
Very nice.
And it's great to be here with you. I'm Kanyar Enshayan. I work at the University of Northern Iowa, and my staff and I are involved in many communities in Iowa, and we're involved in energy conservation, strengthening our local food economy, and a number of other environmental education that also builds our economy as well.
Mm. So both of you are, really at the rubber where it meets the road when it comes to dealing with our environment, dealing with economic policies around that, trying to comply probably with certain economic environmental regulations, so on and so forth. To kind of start out the show, could you maybe just tell us when you hear the word environmentalism or protecting the environment, what does that mean to you personally, and how does that impact your world?
When I think about environmentalism, I think it speaks to an individual's impact on the society in which they exist. When you get up in the morning, how am I impacting the environment? Through when I drive to work, my greenhouse gases, the water that I use, how am I impacting it? And then are the efforts, the things that I'm doing to counterbalance that? When I recycle, when I make that effort to do something to improve the environment, am I balancing the negative impact that I'm going to be having? So I think everything that we do as an individual has an impact on the environment, and it's just thinking about that and living your life with that in mind.
Very good, Kanyar.
Yeah, well said. I guess when I think of the word environmentalism, it's acknowledging that our well-being is interwoven with well-being of everything else around us. So it's acknowledging that relationship, and that's what environmentalism is to know that our well-being, our economy, our health is intertwined with the health of everything else around us. We got to acknowledge that they're one thing.
So I was researching this particular subject, and again, you hear a lot about this these days with everything, with the Paris Agreement and us, potentially getting out of that, and just, a lot of things going on politically. There seems to be this dichotomy between, protecting the environment on the one hand and progressing economically, and how do we marry the two, and so on and so forth. But I want to kind of start out, and we'll get to some of that. And certainly I want to get to what you're doing locally here, because I think that's so important. It impacts our viewers' lives. But when you hear, I want you to react to this statement: a healthy environment is a prerequisite for a healthy economy. Do you think that's true? Do you think that's, what are your initial reactions to that?
Totally. Economy is the human economy is a subset of nature's economy. In other words, the well-being of everything we do is totally interconnected, rooted in the well-being of everything else. It's self-evident. How we say democracy is self-evident, that these things are self-evident. Well, it's just like it's self-evident. Economy and environment are not two things. There's just one thing. It's a falsehood that we've kind of gotten used to, but it's totally, they're the same thing. we can't, let's say in Cedar Rapids, you cannot have a vital economy if the drinking water is not in good shape, if air is polluted, if the land surrounding areas cannot produce food, right? So this, like, it's so interconnected. We may ignore it for a while. We may think our human economy is separated from nature's economy, but we're all in it. It's all interwoven. So
I agree completely. I think, especially in a state like Iowa, where you think about a business like John Deere with huge facilities in the Quad Cities, Dubuque, Waterloo, you know, that's all driven by the land. You know, the farm equipment, the construction equipment. If you don't have a healthy environment for those things, if the people can't have those jobs, it just goes together so well. It ties in. Like, I just agree 100% with what you said.
Yeah, and so but let me push back a little bit and get your thoughts on. You know, there's this idea that well, I mean, empirically, I mean, you look at evolving developing countries, right, in which there is kind of this, you know, somewhat of a bell curve as their economies develop. You know, their impact on the environment goes up, but once they develop to a certain point, you know, they start lessening their impact on the environment. So I'm wondering, and coming at this in a little different way, because intuitively, you kind of think that, well, you need to have a good environment for, you know, to kind of create a fertile environment for your economy. But is the opposite true? Does a developing economy, is that necessary to ultimately protect your environment and also bring wealth to its citizens? So, I mean, is there kind of that initial phase where, yeah, there's going to be a detrimental impact on the environment, but that wanes over time?
I think what you're speaking to, I think we see it happening right now in China. China has set up what they call the Green Wall. They have stopped taking recycling from other markets because they said, we no longer want to be the dumping ground for the world. So it used to be all the recycling, a lot of the recycling in the United States would just get put on ships, go over to China, and you'd leave it there. It took care of it. Now China said, no, we're no longer going to be the dumping ground because their economy has gotten to the point now where they don't need all that material coming in. They're generating enough of their own. So their economy has matured. They're generating that material. They don't need that outside. And now it's left the rest of the world, especially the United States, scrambling. They're trying to find new markets for these things. So the recycling industry in the United States is suffering right now because China has shut them off. China no longer needs it. They've progressed enough as an economy, and now they're looking out for their environment. They don't want to be the dumping ground for what they saw as the world's leftovers. They have their own material, and so now everyone else is trying to figure out, where do we go from here?
Yeah. I mean, for the longest time, China was, you know, I mean, it still is one of the, you know, the largest pollutant countries in the world. But we're seeing now, as they have moved, you know, they're now a developed country, right? That their impact on the environment has gone down, or is going down. So, what are your thoughts, Kanyar?
Well, okay, so there are certain, I can only speak from my experience, you know, I'm not in China. Sure. I can think of here, I can think of where I live. And so there are several things about kind of living in the world, our economy, right? If there were some rules that we would impose on our economy, what would those rules be? If we want to get along with other regions and live here well without compromising a region's ability to provide for us for a long time. So that's one question. Is our economy compromising? Is our behavior as people who live in this region, is it compromising productive capacity of the land for future generation? That's a question we all need to think about. And is our behavior here compromising other regions' ability to live a good life? And there are many indications that our current pattern that we're used to is not good for our region, and it's not good for other regions.
Could you give some examples?
So, for example, we know right now, that electricity production that depends on coal involves mountaintop removal in eastern Kentucky and West Virginia. So our dependence in something that we don't see, but the consequence of our behavior, or demanding too much electricity, has caused damage in other regions, has prevented them to live a healthy life. Now, the global demand for cheap corn and cheap soybeans has meant that people in Des Moines are drinking nitrate. You see what I mean? So we need to figure these out. We need to figure out how can we live in our region and do well and not compromise other regions or our own. So that's, I'm not saying that like, wow, there is like a clear, nice answer to this, but I guess I'm posing it as a question, that as we think about an enduring economy, we need to think about what works for us here, what is possible here. Are we closing options to future generations of Iowans if we have too much soil erosion, for example, right? These are the questions we have to grapple with, you know?
Yeah. So, did you have something you wanted to add to that, or are you good? Okay. So let me just kind of switch gears slightly. So let me just ask this question. Can environmental protection policies lead to economic growth, in your opinion? So, I'm thinking of, for instance, the energy industry. So as the government regulates the, carbon emissions and so on and so forth, necessity is the mother of invention. So, industries scramble to come up with, they invest in new technologies and research and development and all of this, and that inevitably, like I say, leads to hopefully a preservation of the environment ultimately. What are your thoughts there?
Getting not just with energy, but I'm thinking of a government regulation that led to an entire industry in the state of Iowa, the bottle bill. Go back to 1979 when it was implemented. The bottle bill's initial goal was we want to clean up the state. We want to get trash, out of the ditches and improve the look of our state. And look that led to? It led to businesses like the Can Shed here in Cedar Rapids in Iowa City, which employs nearly 60 people, and other places, redemption centers across the state. And the consequences of that, you have material that otherwise some people, they're not going to recycle. They're going to throw that material away. Instead of throwing it away, they're going back to get their deposit back. And then it gives people incentive to recycle. And now the bottle bill has been under threat the last, basically every year since it came out, there's been talk people want to get rid of it. Grocery stores don't like to handle that material. There's those arguments against it. But when you look at the benefits of what it has done for the state of Iowa, cleaning up our roadsides, cleaning up our ditches, creating jobs across the state, you'll find, you go to these smaller communities throughout Iowa, the people who are working these redemption centers in a lot of cases are mainly handicapped people who otherwise wouldn't have these type of jobs. It's fundraisers for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, youth groups. You go down to Kinnick Stadium or Jack Trice and Ames, those people are picking up those cans afterwards. It's created that industry. And I think that's a great example that if we didn't have this law, if the bottle bill went away, those jobs are going to go away.
Yeah. No, that's a great example.
That's a really practical example. Other examples, again, if we come back to the idea of that our economy and quote environment are really the same thing, they're not separate, then protecting the environment is protecting the foundation of our human economy. I mean, everything we do comes from the earth, right? Everything. Right. So it's prime examples of the kind of regulations that we enacted as a process of self-governance have been things like clean air, clean water, right? I mean, health, right? These have led to human health, which is the foundation of our economy again. But unfortunately, again, recently, all of these things that have been they're under attack, kind of like, this idea that, well, we don't, which is very, I mean, again, since there's ethical perspectives, it's like, how can we even second guess the idea that we need clean water? It's really amazing. So there's some, or clean air, or it was regulation of lead. We discovered that lead was a neurotoxin, and we decided that we're not going to allow that to circulate in our economy anymore. Right. It's not going to be in paint. It's not going to be in gasoline. And we're better for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, we live in the environment, so regardless of who, we're the ones that determine this. Any government regulator or the government, whatever that is, I mean, they have to live in this world, right? So it's in their best interest to obviously preserve it the best they can. And of course, the argument again, as we'll talk a little bit more about here, is how to balance the, providing jobs, providing a
Yes.
living wage for
Yeah.
people, while at the same time preserving this world that we live in.
And that's the thing that when you talk about your world, though, like for some people, their world's just going to be Cedar Rapids, Iowa. You know, like for the person in Tennessee or Kentucky, that's a world away. They're not even thinking about that. So that's where you have to go beyond just where you are and think of the bigger picture.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. That is an excellent point, and that applies to so many things in life, right? Where you just don't know what you don't know, and this thing you don't see, you don't think about, right? And so that can have positive and negative effects, for sure.
Okay, so I want to come back to your question was an interesting. You said whether environmental protection can lead to economic growth, right? So the part that maybe is a little, that's something that it needs more thinking, is the growth part. I think it's fair to say that that environmental protection can protect the well-being of the human economy for all the reasons that you mentioned. But also, our economy works within certain bounds, and the unlimited growth isn't possible, even though our political thinking, everybody says economic growth, but in the physical world of actuality, there are actual limits, there are biological limits, there are physical limits to growth. And it's not good for the foundation of life, which is the environment, for there to be anything unlimited growth. There's limits. So in that sense, it's like, economic growth, I would say environmental protection is good for a good economy.
Yeah,
that's as far as I would.
Exactly right. And economic growth, maybe you're thinking of just suburbia expanding into infinity, right? Well, no, not necessarily. In fact, I mean, the trend is kind of opposite, right? People are moving into urban centers and becoming more environmentally conscious and living more efficiently and things like that, as people become more conscious. So in a sense, and they're becoming wealthier, right? They're having, one of the things I was going to bring up specifically with you, Joe, in your line of work with the Solid Waste Agency, that I think kind of illustrates what we're talking about here when it comes to economic growth and how that can take on many forms. So let me ask both of you this, but I guess I want to start with you, Joe. Does economic progress lead to more or less waste in your experience? So I use an example of smartphones, for instance, right? We all carry smartphones, with the exception of Kanyar, which I'm very jealous of. But, you think about that. Just a simple example. I think there's multiple examples of how now all of a sudden we have in one device, it's our video camera, it's our phone, it's our GPS system, it's our calculator, a gaming system for kids and adults alike, a compass, a flat. I mean, you just can go on and on and on with all of these physical devices that previously were just, thrown into a landfill.
10 things condensed into one.
But I think that's a really good point of how, as we progress economically, and certainly had to go, we kind of had to go through all those devices and all of that technology kind of merged together to give us a very smooth, efficient, and ultimately a device that produces less waste. So do you think that's a great example, or do you think there's something we're missing there?
I think what you have to think about is, so when you get that device, what do you do with the old one? You still have it. That's going to go somewhere. And I see the end result of that. We have an electronics recycling program. So when that person, they get the new flat screen TV, it's time to get rid of their old big box CRT TV. That comes into us. And VCRs, it breaks. This is such an economy now where things are so cheap. Where a brand new 50-inch TV can only cost you $250.
And lasts for like a year, right?
Exactly. And so it's like, do I go repair this? No, you just go get a brand new one. So it's that disposable economy. So there is more. I think being generated. But then you think about Amazon. It's so easy. You order that. So many cardboard boxes coming in, and that's where I think recycling comes into play. People. You're getting more things, but now you have more outlets to get rid of it. There's a right way to recycle cardboard, to recycle electronics, all those different things. So I think there's more more material being generated, but there's more outlets for it too.
Okay. Yeah, and this kind of just goes into the idea of recycling, which again is a big part of what you do. I mean, you read different things in the news about, the demand in China for is going down. Is recycling economically viable? Is it something that we're going to continue to do going forward? What are your thoughts on that?
That economically viable is the key there, because recycling is completely driven by markets. We're so conditioned to think that recycling is free. I put it on my curb. It's part of my garbage collection service I pay for. Recycling is not free. You are paying to process that. In Linn County, the solid waste agency pays for a little bit more than half of it, and then the other people, the taxpayers, are picking up that other half. So right now, it is still cheaper to recycle than it is just to throw material away. But what's to happen if recycling markets continue to go down, and that demand for recycled plastic goes down even further? For mixed paper goes down further. When those go down, metal follows, and then we reach a point. Are you willing to pay to have something recycled so it can be reused, but it's going to cost you more? And so it comes down to a question of personal choice. How important is it to you to know that I'm keeping this material out of the ground so that it can get reused, but it's going to cost me a little bit extra?
Kanyar, do you have anything? Otherwise, I have another question for Joe.
Okay, well, kind of, so in my line of work, and one of our staff who is working on this everybody says reduce, reuse, recycle. Recycle is really the very last option. The very first option is reduce, and reduce is a cultural thing, right? We need to go through a lot less stuff. Is it possible to live a happy life with fewer things, fewer stuff? And from what I've understood around the world, yeah, it is. And we were. There is a history of frugality and doing with less, and less is more. There's a lot. There's so many cultural cultural traditions that can help us live a good life with fewer things that then need to be recycled, et cetera, et cetera. So, but we don't. There is nobody saying reduce. That's not that's not part. Recycling is like big, but nobody's saying, wow, reduce. Oh, wow, you see what I mean? This stuff has to go somewhere. It has to be manufactured, right? I mean, there's a huge impact.
Well, I mean, this really gets to the crux of the discussion here, right? So if you reduce your intake, you're obviously, in some ways, slowing the engine of the economy, right? So this kind of gets to that rub, right? Of, okay, it sounds good to reduce, minimalist lifestyle. You hear a lot about that, and we don't need so many things. Don't spend your money, save it, But is that the ethical way to live? I mean, again, it sounds noble. Not to spend your money. It sounds noble not to acquire things, but does that benefit humanity the most?
I think about my most recent order. I came home and saw my Amazon box there, and somebody brought that to my house. A truck driver transported that. Somebody flew it in a plane wherever it came from. Somebody manufactured that. So that was creating a job for somebody. So it is a it is a very difficult line to walk, because you don't want to take food out of someone's mouth.
Yeah. So one way of thinking about it is, it's not that you're not supported. You'll be part of a different economy. So let's say, if we manufactured things in ways that they were more durable and fixable and repairable, then you would have an entire different set of jobs that fixing shoes. Why can't I just take these pair of shoes and put a new sole on? When I moved to Cedar Falls, there were 2 places I could do that, but I know, because we don't have to, right? So there's so many things have kind of cheapened the raw products, and we've lost the culture of frugality and culture of doing with less, and now, so in other words, there would be a different economy and there would be other jobs. It's just that won't be, maybe not trucked, or maybe it won't be a Google office somewhere or Amazon. It would be a whole set of new enterprises that we haven't, that run on sunshine and on labor and local people.
Yeah. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I think what I want to do is really bring this close to home again with the Solid Waste Agency and what's going on with that, and again, touching on what we've been talking about, and that is this idea of I think what we're saying is acquiring these things, purchasing these things, especially these reusable cheap products, clothes, so on and so forth, they end up in a landfill, which we think of as bad. It's bad that they're going to a landfill, and we need to avoid that at all costs, either through recycling or reducing our consumption, reusing stuff. So let me ask you, is it bad that things are going to a landfill? Does that destroy or impact our environment in some way?
Right now, the landfill for getting rid, we want things that end up in the landfill as the last resort. So if it can, first reduce at the source, not come in at all, reuse it, recycle it if you can. But at the end of the day, there's just some things that are going to have to be thrown away. And so for here in Linn County, the landfill is the best option right now. We're always looking for alternatives. It has to be environmentally safe and economically viable. And so you'll hear about a lot of different things, but it comes down to the question again, how much you're willing to pay. Do you want to pay 3 times, 4 times as much to get rid of something, to know that it's not being landfilled and it's going to some alternative? Or would you say, hey, I know that it's going into a landfill here that is engineered with 4 feet of clay, a geomembrane liner, so that we don't have to worry about things breaking down and leaking into the water system 100 to 200 years from now. So right now, I think it's a good option for Linn County. But there's only so much space. So what's going to happen in 20 to 25 years when the landfill in Linn County fills up? Will there be a new technology by that point? Hopefully.
Yeah. So a couple things there. So one of the things you hear about is the trash to energy, right? Is that something the Cedar Rapids Linn County Solid Waste Agency has thought about? That's something the Solid Waste Agency is doing right now. At our County Home Road facility, we have a gas to energy system. So we capture the methane, the other landfill gases that accumulate when the organics break down. And at our Mount Trashmore location, right now there's a flare there, and it burns it off, destroys 99% of the gases, and that's good for the environment. But at County Home Road, it goes into this engine, and then gets processed, goes down to a substation further down the County Home Road, and then it goes out into the electrical grid. And right now, we create enough electricity each day to power 1,100 homes in Linn County.
Amazing.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and so then as the landfill ages, it will produce more gases. There might be a
as
need.
the stuff breaks down further.
There might be a need for a second engine, and so that creates more electricity. And this is something we talk about the economics of it. We knew it was a big initial investment, and we thought it was going to take 10 years to see that return on investment. And it's creating more electricity than thought. It's going to pay for itself within 7 years.
And I'm assuming this technology just continually improves and becomes more efficient.
It's a methane capture system, which is when you said trash to energy, I thought you meant burning trash.
I think there is some technology that does do that too, right?
Some communities do, but that's very troublesome because of all the volatile organic compounds, heavy metals, a number of other troubles. But this method that Joe described is really capturing the methane that's leaving and putting it to good use.
And we know that 20% of the garbage stream in the state of Iowa is organics. It's food waste.
All right, so we just have like a minute and a half, maybe a minute. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening at Mount Trashmore? It's certainly been on the news. I mean, people are talking about the overlook, but tell us about how we've gotten to this point and what the future looks like.
Mount Trashmore took in garbage for 50 years, and now it's the tallest point, elevation 948, and so we have a scenic overlook built at the top. We right now are in the process of putting in a walking trail for people to go to the top, a flow trail for bicyclists to go down there. It's going to open up early July here, hopefully weather permitting with the construction, and really it's going to be a chance for people to come in, take in a great view, and then also think about they're standing on a part of history of Linn County. This is where all that garbage went for so long. Literally going to be standing on it, and just to see that there is an alternative, there is use for this to become a recreation destination after all that years of garbage.
Yeah. Well, that is an absolute perfect example of how the marriage of economic progress and environmental protection. So again, thank you both for joining us this morning. I hope you've enjoyed our talk, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, and have a great day.